Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me now, I have Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri, public policy consultant and visiting scholar, Loyola University, Chicago, United States. Yemi Adamolekun, executive director in Office Enough, and Chike Ogea, former commissioner for information at Delta State. Well, Chike, it's good to see you. You've been on vacation, more or less.
Is it vacation?
You've been busy.
I've been very busy.
Yes,
very,
so it's good
busy.
to have you back. And
thank you.
It's just as well that you are returning the day after June 12. And we had Professor Beliua, who had been looking at the situation in the country within the context of June 12 and all the issues that affect us. I'd like to have your perspective first on the symbolism, significance of June 12, and some of those issues that Professor Ua raised about unity, about social cohesion, about the fault lines, and what can be done to rescue Nigeria before 2050.
Well, like the professor said, it's a pity that in 1993, that golden opportunity was given to this country where all of that should have been and would have been a thing of the past. Because we had an election then, which was judged to be the best election, free and fair ever, that we had ever had here. And the indices of the election showed exactly what it was. We had a Muslim ticket, a Kanuri man from Borno State, a Muslim, was the vice presidential candidate. A Yoruba man from Abeokuta, an Egba man, was the presidential candidate. And together in a multicultural, multi-ethnic country like Nigeria, they won the election, hands down. I mean, it was such that the closest rival, Bashir Tofa, was even beaten in his home state in Kano. So, you know, that spoke volume of what Nigerians wanted. And that showed what should have happened for us to have become a nation, for us to have become a country, if you understand what I mean, with a common purpose, with a common destiny. But somehow or the other, the military refused, you know, for very selfish reasons, as we can see. Even the other day, I was reading where Muhammadu Babangida said he had to ask his dad, Dad, why did you annul this election? And his father said to him that you are too young to understand. So it was obvious that there were forces, you know, in the military at that time that stopped Babangida, who was de facto, you know, the grand norm, as it were, in a military setup, from doing the right thing. And ever since then, we have suffered. So what we had to do was wait for a personality who would come, like to an extent, an Obasanjo, who was even the beneficiary of that struggle at the end of the day, you know, just God's work, because it wasn't as if he was even part of Nadeco or anything. In fact, if I recall, when Obasanjo was asked at that time, he said Abiola wasn't the Messiah Nigeria was looking for. But somehow or the other, in 1999, the powers that be threw him up, and he became the next president. But Obasanjo understood Nigeria. That was where, you know, and he was a nationalist, and he could deal with everything. Don't forget, Sharia law was thrown at Obasanjo, depending on the way he handled it. This country could have gone up in flames at that time. But he understood the dynamics of what kept this country together. He knew that inclusion, like you said, was 9/10 of the problem with Nigeria. Once everybody feels a part of the federation, not in terms of what my brother is doing for me or what my brother is not doing for me, because as I keep asking, the 8 years of Obasanjo, how has it affected Abeokuta? You are from there, tell me. Or the 6 years of Jonathan, what has he done to Bayelsa?
The Fifth Amendment.
What has he done for Bayelsa State? But it still does not matter, because that's not the point. The point is that the whole ethnic group will feel that at least we are part of the matrix or the matrix of power in the country. And somehow or the other, if we don't have the institutions that can guarantee that, and we are waiting for the personalities that will come and do it, then we have a situation where we now have a Muhammadu Buhari, who, I mean, we all know his antecedents. He was the president. He was the head of state in the country at the time. We knew at the time when Goodluck was the president, and he went to Oyo State And he said to the governor then, I think, was it Ladoja, which of them, that why are you killing my people? So you see, he didn't wait to become a president before he showed the kind of person what his DNA was really all about. This is a man who sees himself first and foremost as a Fulani man. And I don't think you should grudge him that. Now, I think Nigerians should even, maybe let's do some study into why he is like that. What has happened in the past that has made him become like the way he is now, instead of us just complaining? Were there anything the past leadership has done, even maybe from the coup that he was so actively, he felt so bad about? I'm talking about the 66 coup, from what Ironsi and Co did. Maybe that was where it was from, where he said, look, I don't have time for this country anymore. And ever since then, he's been waiting for his chance to do whatever it is he thinks he's doing now. But you see, Nigeria is too complex. That's the point. And that's what our leaders should understand. No leader from any part of Nigeria can come and play an ethnic agenda and get away with it. In fact, the people you think are the ones that would checkmate you might not even be the ones.
Well,
you
just to remind you,
yes.
Chike, in the President's Democracy Day address yesterday, at paragraph 56, he said he's committed to section 14, subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution, which talks about the security and welfare of all Nigerians.
Yes.
He did not exclude any Nigerian.
Okay,
just so you know that.
No, I agree. You see, what people say, what our leaders say, is different from what we are seeing, and you know it. How come there is Boko Haram in the north, killing Nigerians like never before? Then these disenchanted IPOB boys start their own issues where they
dodge in a circle.
No, let's
the president described them.
Let's leave them alone. And they are killing the Igbo people and also destroying vital, critical government installations and assets in the east after the civil war, when we know the southeast was already in deficit of all of that. So this tells you that these are people that need guidance. Now, Nnamdi Kanu has obviously hijacked that vacuum because the leadership of the southeast somehow or the other has vacated it. And Nnamdi Kanu has done that, driven so much fear into the people there, so they cannot even speak now. But then what happens? When they do anything in the southeast, you want to crush them.
Okay, Chike.
So these are the problems.
On that note,
we can't have different parameters for different people in one federation.
Well, on that note, we'll take a short break, and then when we return, I will ask Yemi Adamolekun and Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri to make their contribution. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me in the studio, Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri, public policy consultant and visiting scholar, Loyola University, Chicago. Yemi Adamolekun, executive director, in office in all. And Chike Ogia, former commissioner for information at Delta State. Yemi Adamolekun, it's good to see you again this week. Quickly, I'd like to have your take on June 12 and the submissions by Professor Beliua on the state of the nation and the way forward.
Thank you. Good to see you as well. Hello, Dr. Nwaneri and Mr. Ogia. Good to have you back. So are we talking about June 12th, the president's speech now? I should save that one for later.
Say what you want to say. I think Professor Beliua addressed all of those issues, including the president's speech.
All of the above.
Yes.
All right. Good. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I find polling quite fascinating. I like the question you asked about how polls can be misleading or predict wrongly. And I think it's important to note it was the U.S. elections that showed that a lot when Trump became president, that people said one thing and voted a different way. Because they also felt that if they said they were going to vote for President Trump, it would look bad, it would reflect badly. So literally they lied. Let's put it that way. So there's also a way that, yes, you can, I mean, you're asking people questions and they can choose to lie to you. So yeah, it's always interesting how polls come out. But I do agree with the crux of what he said. We are at a season where Nigerians don't feel that the Nigerian state cares about them. They're disenchanted and are looking from people emigrating to people fighting for independence, quote unquote, and it's what we see. But unfortunately, Mr. President, from the Arise TV interview to some of his other comments, he's not in 2021. Mr. President is in, I don't even know what year I can say Mr. President is in. And yes, as Mr. Arua said, he's an elderly man, understandably so. I mean, my father will be 80 next year. We don't see things the same way, understand this the same way. But my father understands and admits the limits of his age and the limits of his own understanding given 2021. Number one. Number two, foundations matter. Mr. President is not a widely read man. After he stopped being president in the 80s, all we can point to that he did was he raised his cows and he lived a very quiet, sedentary lifestyle. So he's not read, he didn't read, he didn't go back to school. His capacity and his exposure is quite limited. It is what it is. And so I'm not quite sure you can blame him for that. You can't really. And when you talk about it in the context of then why was he elected, a lot of the narrative at the time was that he provides a sort of strong moral compass, no corruption, he's a former commander-in-chief, so he will understand security issues. And then he was surrounded, at least at that time, by people that Nigerians believe understood Nigeria and could do the work and, in a sense, inform him. Now, when you have a system now, fast forward to 2021, and those are some of the issues Mr. Iwa raised when he said, everybody's blaming the president, what about the people around him? But also, unfortunately, if the people around you are misinforming you, and because you are limited in your capacity to read, understand issues, and take independent decisions, President Obasanjo, as Mr. Ogier alluded to, was quite famous for reading papers himself. Even when people brought newspapers to him pointing to separate things, he would read other things. Obviously, he was a global citizen. He was known internationally. He could refer to other former heads of states who knew him, and so he was a very different type of president because he was exposed and he had networks that he could rely on. Mr. President's network was quite limited. Anyway, all of that to say that where we are is a function of his limitation, and that the people around him who could help him, so to speak, are not helping him. So he's as limited, and unfortunately, we are bearing the brunt of that. The Arise TV interview, for example, he said that young people who wanted to remove him from power and that they need to behave themselves so that foreign direct investments can come to Nigeria. I mean, the connection of that was quite mind-boggling. Anyway, to his speech, paragraph 14, he talks about the fact that the twin underlying drivers of insecurity are poverty and youth unemployment. He forgets injustice. In a system that is unjust, you can never have security. Secondly, he talks about in paragraphs 48 and 50 that, paragraph 50, he talks about that his government is not averse to constitutional reform, but the amendments lies with the National Assembly. And then in paragraph 52, he then says, government is, however, willing to play a critical role in the constitutional amendment process. I'm sorry, is National Assembly not government? There are three arms of government, but all of them are government. So I thought for me that distinction was actually quite significant. And then he talks in paragraph 54 and 55 about the day that he joined the Nigerian army, he was prepared to lay down his life for Nigeria. And then says, as your president, I remain ever committed to upholding and defending Nigeria's corporate existence. In 58, he talks about renewed commitment to keep our country one. Now, given the context of the fact that a lot of people are saying that they don't feel that Nigeria caters to them and they feel a part of Nigeria, they feel marginalized, for a president on a June 12 broadcast to emphasize keeping Nigeria one without discussing the underlying issues that are making Nigerians feel that Nigeria is theirs and they want to go away is a huge problem. It's signaling of a sort of very important signaling of how he understands where we are. And lastly, I'll end by saying that June 12, yes, and definitely made our democracy under him, agitated for many years and finally happened in 2018. But it's also interesting that for a lot of people in the North, June 12 is still a Southern thing. Even though it's a national holiday, it's still a Southern thing. And so for a president on a June 12 broadcast, not recognizing that people feel that they're in different Nigerias and not acknowledge that, lets you know where he is. So a man cannot give you what he does not have. He has repeatedly over the last 6 years shown us that he has no capacity for this conversation. So having said that, what do we as Nigerians need to do to reframe this conversation? And I'll land by saying we really need to focus on our National Assembly and get them to make a provision for, because we need to renegotiate how we are at this table called Nigeria. And yes, it's only the National Assembly that can do it. And the constitutional amendment process should really focus on that. Let's do a one issue amendment. Let's have a referendum and let's renegotiate what it means to be in Nigeria and Nigerians.
To Dr. Nwaneri, yes.
So, what do you want to know?
Feel free. We're discussing Nigeria, the state of the nation, and the way forward.
Brutal honesty or niceness? Okay, let's be serious. Okay, so first thing I'd like to say is that I do agree with our guest on a lot of notes. And he approached it from the perspective of a statistician. One of the things that I would like to ask him is these terms that we bandy around, like Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. We're 200 million. A lot of Nigerians are very, very poor, I agree. However, Togo cannot be the poverty capital of the world, no matter how poor they get, because there are 8 million people, right? So my issue is that when we hear figures, percentages, what are the contents of those percentages? That is the first question I'd like to raise, and I'd like for us to think about it. Dr. Bhatt is always saying that I problematize issues, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. The next thing I'd like to talk about is, yes, I do agree with a lot of what he says. For instance, the increasing feeling of division, right? It's, but I will say it's a reaction to the poverty that we're talking about. So it is not as if I'm saying that, of course, we've gotten poorer. Inequality has also increased. We don't talk about it. Rich people are getting richer, but they're just not talking about it. I will not name names, right? And poor people are getting poorer. It's a global phenomenon, and we don't talk about that. Later, we'll talk about the G7 summit. Hopefully, we have time to talk about that because it has implications for how money is shared. That comes up because that's an important thing. So it's not as if, yes, we're not a rich country, but where's the money going? Maybe we should start asking questions like that and not talk about poverty as if it came with the rain. It didn't. It's a function of policies, the function of what we have decided to do and not to do. Then I'm going to go to the presidency. I agree with a lot of things that has been said here. However, I'd like to point out something. So, kind of like an agreement. So, when you listen to the president's speech and you read the transcript, you see somebody who is not as in touch as he should be with this massive population of young people that we have in Nigeria. So, and he is doing, I agree with you, I mean, he is doing what he knows. Now, the question is what he knows enough? But I have a bigger problem, the distinction between the president and the presidency. The office of the presidency is part of the institution that has failed us and that is failing us. So you read the speech and you wonder, who are the president's handlers? So on the one hand, there's the issue of the president bringing up policies that we're wondering. So there are quite a few things, positive things he said. We've done this, we've done this, we've done that. But the question is, in 2021, digital age, there was nothing there. There was nothing in his speech, nothing, no, the boast was about agriculture. The boast was about we've created what small and medium-scale enterprises. But there was nothing about leveraging on what our young people are capable of doing. So that policy gap, to me, is problematic. To me, it shows that, well, over the next 5 years, you see we're going to remove 100 people from poverty over a period of 10 years. I don't know what the content of that is. And then now we've removed, according to him, less than 2 million people 6 years down the line from poverty, according to him. There's also this notion of how there's a conditional cash transfer of 10,000 naira, per poor household. I do not know where that is happening. Maybe people are not admitting to it. But those policies, I wonder how much we're leveraging on technology. I wonder how much we're making an effort to go in the direction that the world is going. And that brings me back to Chike's comment about how young people should be part of the conversation. Now, if you don't have young people leading the conversation, we're going to go to policies that are from the past, right? Because the older generations are from the past. They're going to do their best based on what they know how to do. Then I'm going to go to the question of, are we ready to talk about June 12th protests yet?
Well, that's our next topic.
Okay, so I'm going to stick to our guest. He talked about exclusion, how people all over the country, he made a point of that in different pockets of Nigeria, people are feeling excluded. That is because of this misguided notion that other people have it better. The grass is greener in other places. We're poor because, well, those people in Lagos and Abuja are well off. Those people that are getting, 13% derivation, they're better off. Some of this information is wrong because if everybody is feeling excluded, who is included? I'd like to know. And then I have a problem with, because I know my time is running out, I'd like to say something that mention something the president said in his speech. He said that the reason why there's so much part of the reason why there's so much insecurity in the north is because he came on a ticket of addressing insecurity, and that when bandits were released from or dispersed from the northeast, they ran into different parts of the country, and that is part of the problem we're facing now. And I'm wondering, who allowed him put that in the speech? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, Dr. Nwaneri, we'll still have the opportunity to talk a bit more about this very important subject. But let's take another short break here on Thisday Live, the Sunday Talk Show. When we return, the program continues. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with me, I have Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri, Yemi Adamolekun, and Chike Ogea. Now, let's go to our next topic. President Muhammadu Buhari on Saturday, that is yesterday, addressed Nigerians as the country marked Democracy Day. According to the president, Democracy Day is a celebration of freedom and victory for one people, one country, and one Nigeria. While acknowledging that Nigeria was still on its way to become a mature democracy, the president said the country has witnessed and overcome in the last 2 years a good number of testing challenges that will have destroyed other nations, especially relating to our collective security.
Nigerians, I join you all today to commemorate and celebrate our Democracy Day. It is a celebration of freedom and a victory for one people, one country, and one Nigeria. As with all democracies, we'll always be going through improvement processes in our desire to reach the goal of a mature democracy, a strong, evolved, and integrated nation state to be reckoned with globally.
Shortly after the president's address, Nigerians across the country hit the streets to protest over issues such as insecurity and freedom of speech. They were attacked by security operatives who shot tear gas canisters at the protesters and journalists.
At this point, the June 12th protest organized by some activists, some youth activists who have taken to the street from the K2 axis down to the Galefa Park in Ojota, has been dispersed by police operatives who first started shooting tear gas canisters, but eventually started shooting live bullets.
Well, the protest yesterday. Yemi, I'll still come to you. I think we've done enough analyzing the president's speech, and everyone has had a say on that. But how about the protests and how the security agencies responded? In Lagos, yes, there was tear gas. In other parts of the country, particularly in the south, yes. But at the end of the day, many of the persons who were arrested, particularly in Lagos, were also released. Your thoughts about what happened yesterday and why the protests turned out in that manner?
Thank you. I'm very glad that citizens went out to protest. I'm glad that despite the clampdown and the messaging and the the expected heavy presence of police and the army, that they still went out. I'm glad that June 12, for all that it represents, was an opportunity to still assert that as citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that we have a right to speak our minds, especially when we're dissatisfied with government. There were multiple messages. There were those who had Buhari must go. There were those who talked about insecurity. There were those who talked about poor governance. But the mixed messaging was also a reflection of what people were digital rights, as the banner you're just showing says, that was also part of it as well. But I think what was also very significant for me, the response of the military and the police were not unexpected. And I think the people who went out also expected that. It's almost, as they say, it's where we are as a country, where the state is afraid of citizens simply saying, none of the reports I've heard said anybody had arms, anybody was destroying anything. This was citizens protesting with pieces of paper and flex material. But I think the other side for me was that, especially for Lagos, I'm not quite sure about Abuja, that the streets were bare. So even though the numbers isn't like thousands and thousands of people came out, but I think the understanding that citizens were going to protest, for me, and the warnings that came with it meant citizens chose to stay home because they recognized what could have happened. And I think in another way, that was a protest of a different type, if I would use those words. But the process will continue for the foreseeable future as we talk about what is happening in Nigeria. And I would disagree with Dr. Nwaneri, just as I end, about the perception that the grass is greener on the other side is why people feel that they don't matter in Nigeria. Perception is cognitive reality. And so how people feel, you can't take that away from them. If anybody wants to make them feel better and understand better, then the onus is on the state to provide facts and figures that debunk how people feel. So when mothers in Benue are wailing that their children are being killed and nobody is saying anything, or people in southern Kaduna are saying that their communities are being ransacked and nobody is saying anything, nobody is being brought to justice, we're documenting, my organization and several others, documenting missing people, documenting victims of mass atrocities across the country. And from your state government and the federal government, nobody's acknowledging that, are dealing with that. Mixed messaging when members of the National Assembly are telling you that bandits are just citizens who are upset, and so we should have a conversation with them. But you say IPOB are terrorists because they're terrorizing people in the southeast, or because they're calling, actually, no, not even because they're terrorizing people in the southeast, but because they're asking for secession. That's mixed messaging. And so when mixed messaging is coming from the highest level of government, and it's not once, it's not twice, it's not 3 times, not 4 times, it's repeated, you can't take that away, that people feel that for some people, certain actions are acceptable or overlooked, or you don't get the full weight of the law. Wow. But let somebody cough in Imo, and the whole force of the army has shown up there.
Let me come to you, Dr. Nwaneri.
So in response to Yemi, exclusion is different from violence. If somebody does something to you, it is different from feeling that the state has excluded your part of the country. So maybe we were talking past each other. But I'd like to say something about yesterday. The difference between the military and the police is that while the police sees offenders as people who have committed a crime, the military can only see an offender as the enemy of the state. Therefore, the police is, ideally, mandate of the police is to arrest, mandate of the military is to destroy that which is about to destroy sovereignty. And that is the reason why in a democracy, you do not unleash the military on the citizens. Now, I am not trying to say that Nigeria is not a democracy. Don't look at me like that. But the point I'm making here is that is the difference. Another thing I'd like to mention about yesterday, I find it very interesting that a lot of regions in Nigeria, be it the north with banditry that has led to increased, let me say, state presence in the direction, in an attempt to manage, violence and what is going on in different parts of the north. There's increased police and military presence. In the southeast, there's increased police and military presence. In the southwest, however, things are still a bit manageable in the sense that people could actually come out and protest. Now, what I want to ask the people that wrote the document that released people, that endorsed the military and police presence with the people that were protesting, as Yemi said, you are supposed to protect your citizens' right to protest. You are supposed to protect resources, right? So nobody said they got violent, therefore the police put them in place. Nobody said that. It's almost as if the state has decided that its citizens are its enemies. And ideologically, that is really problematic, because that means that any of us can be considered enemy of the state based on a subjective decision on the part of some of the people that manage some of our institutions. And as far as I'm concerned, for a polity, that in itself is a psychological crisis. We have a big problem, because once you start seeing your own children, your own people you're supposed to protect, as enemies of the state, once they move, we have a problem. I'm going to stop there.
The only thing to add to this is that the protests did not only occur in Nigeria yesterday, predominantly in the southern part. There were protests in New York and Washington, in London, in Paris, in Canada, parts of Canada, showing that, look, this is not just about Nigeria. It's about Nigeria within a global context. And just as Nigerians at home are concerned, Nigerians in diaspora are even more concerned about the future and the state of Nigeria. Over to you, Chike Ogab.
Well, the two ladies have surmised most of the issues about the protest. I just want to look a bit at the underlying issues here. Now, we have a Democracy Day, which should be a day to celebrate democracy. That is what it's all about. And that is why it was shifted from May 29th to June 12th, which really is the day, anything near democracy was supposed to have happened in Nigeria. So it's maybe one of the ironies of a time that on such a day, when citizens are meant to go out on the streets and celebrate, and be happy, freedom, all the tenets of democracy, you understand, should be celebrated on that day. Instead, citizens are going out to protest. That tells there's a problem. So those are the things we should look at. Why even after changing the day to be a day of celebration on June 12th, are there still such underlying undercurrents that people are still have so much grievances, especially in the southern part of Nigeria, whether we like it or not? And then we have these issues of, people are coming out and saying, these are my issues, these are what bother my people, and then the state will sponsor people to come and, be a counterforce and all of that. I don't understand what is going on. We're making ourselves a laughing stock here. Maybe democracy is not for the black man, I don't know. Maybe we have to find another system of government, because if you ask me, I don't think we have the hang of democracy at all in Nigeria. It's like every time we take one step forward, we take 10 steps backwards. And those are the issues. Then coming to another celebrated issue, which everybody talks about, and both Yemi and Ndidi have talked about it or talked around it. You see, when I speak, especially when I'm on this chair, on this program, I talk from my experience. I don't even talk from my knowledge. I talk from my experience, because don't forget that most of my working life, I have worked in government. I have worked in state government and I have worked in the federal government. I have actually worked in the presidency. So I know how these things work. And you start trying to make a distinction about the presidency and the president. No, all those things don't matter. Go and read our constitution. You should understand that the president is the presidency. Let's stop making that mistake. The president defines the presidency. So whatever you see anybody doing around the presidency, just know that is the bidding of the president. So don't go beyond that, trying to second guess and looking for excuses of why this person is saying this and saying that. No, there's no need for all of that. That is the
correct.
truth.
There is only one president also. Quickly, let's take the next subject, Islamic State of the West African province. The West African branch of the Islamic State group, known as ISWAP, says that Abubakar Shakal, the leader of the rival Nigerian militant Islamist group, Boko Haram, is dead. In an audio recording, a person purporting to be ISWAP leader, Abu Musaba Banawi, says Shakal died sometime around May the 18th after detonating an explosive device when he was pursued by ISWAP fighters following a battle. Last month, Nigeria's military said it was investigating Shakal's alleged death, which was reported in local and international media. The audio statement is ISWAP's first confirmation that its arch-rival in the Lake Chad region has been killed. Correspondents, however, say that the Boko Haram leader has been reported killed on several occasions over the last 12 years, including a military announcement, only to later appear in a video post. In this latest audio recording, al-Banawi said his fighters had sought out the warlord on the orders of the Islamic State leadership and battled Boko Haram insurgents until Shakal fled. Well, on this, let me come back to you, Chike. You will carry drums and start dancing. At last, Ibrahim Shakal has been reported dead, and his death has been confirmed by the ISWAP.
Really and truly speaking, these things, like I said to you, they get even more confusing, at least for me. Is it better for Nigeria to replace Boko Haram with ISWAP? I think that's the first things we should be asking ourselves. Then how come we had this brutal terrorist leader in Shakal for 12 years or how many years, and Nigerian forces have been unable to get at him or to eliminate him, and then it took a rival terrorist group to kill him, and we are now celebrating in Nigeria? Do we know what ISWAP's agenda is and what they are going to replace that vacuum of Shakal? Is it going to even be something more brutal? Because if I know what ISWAP or ISIS stands for, they are even a much more globally brutal terrorist group. So what are we saying? Those are the things, I really don't understand.
Well, Dr. Wanere.
The
death of Shakal, will more Shakals emerge? What is the Nigerian government doing to make sure that that does not happen? And that even ISWAP is not given a space, to be able to operate. Although someone, we're told, has suggested that the Nigerian government should get a faction, possibly the ISWAP, to help solve the problem that the Nigerian military has not been able to solve.
I don't know. I agree with you, Chike. There's nothing to celebrate because this sounds really evil. Because what I'm going to say sounds really evil. Sometimes you want to know precisely where your enemy is. Remember the comment I pulled from the president's speech where he said that we were attacking Boko Haram. Unfortunately, we drove them into the country. So when you're not even in control of your space, I don't know. Of course, there's nothing to celebrate because now it's either we have a stronger ISWAP or we have a fragmented Boko Haram. Those are our two options, given the track record of how we as a country have handled the Northeast. However, this is not to say that a lot of our military people have lost their lives, right? And we will forever owe them and their families. However, on the policy level, at the national level, we're not in control. We're not in control of that space. So I don't know what it's going to bring, what this means for us, but of all the options on the table, I think celebration is probably the last thing we should be doing at this point.
Well, Yemi, your turn. The death of Ibrahim Shakal, as reported and as confirmed.
Well, it's not confirmed because
ISWAP says they've confirmed it.
Well,
Whereas the Nigerian authorities that have not confirmed it.
Not even Nigeria. Nigerian authorities have no intel to confirm anything. I don't know what we're expecting. So until Shakal doesn't do a video for the next 1 year saying, well, oops, I'm still here, that's when I'll believe it. So for me, it doesn't really mean anything. But I think the larger issues are what they've raised. That the fact that he's dead doesn't mean anything. It just means somebody else is now terrorizing the country. So we still have the same problems on our hands.
Well, quickly, let's take the next subject, which is something also of great concern to Nigerians. Nigeria and Twitter. Social media firm, microblogging site Twitter, is seeking high-level discussions with the Nigerian government after the platform's operations were suspended in the country. The Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, said Twitter reached out to the government on Wednesday morning to find ways to resolve the issue.
Decision to suspend Twitter has been lauded by some. It has been decried by some. But we want to make it clear that
the Senate President, Ahmad Lawan, has also weighed in on the ban, saying Nigeria needs Twitter, just as Twitter needs Nigeria. Therefore, a dialogue between both parties to quickly resolve the suspension of the microblogging platform is imperative.
They are talking with Twitter to resolve this matter. That's what we had. And our belief is Nigeria needs Twitter just as much as Twitter needs Nigeria. And our expectation is that this engagement between the federal government of Nigeria and Twitter.
Meanwhile, the United States has condemned Nigeria's suspension of Twitter. The State Department spokesperson, Ned Price, says the order has no place in a democracy and contravenes freedom of expression.
The United States condemns the ongoing suspension of Twitter by the Nigerian government and subsequent threats to arrest and to prosecute Nigerians who use Twitter. The United States is likewise concerned that the Nigerian National Broadcasting Commission ordered all television and radio broadcasters to cease using Twitter. For 60 years, the United States has been proud to partner with Nigeria on a broad array of issues and objectives, with the cornerstone of this relationship being premised on the vibrancy of democracy, a principle embraced by our two nations. Unduly restricting the media and all Nigerians from reporting, gathering, or disseminating opinions and information has no place in a democracy, and it undermines our partnership.
Well, Yemi, let me come straight to you. Nigeria and Twitter. Latest developments, Minister of Information saying there will be dialogue, that Twitter is reaching out. And more importantly, the Attorney General of the Federation saying that at no time did he threaten to arrest anybody. Instead, what he said was that persons who encourage or support or enable Twitter to continue to sabotage Nigeria, in quotes, are the ones who will be arrested, but not religious leaders, not persons exercising their freedom of expression. What do you think?
Thank you. Well, Mr. Malami, he did say anybody using Twitter will be prosecuted. So when the response was Pastor Iye Adeboye and Pastor Kumuyi tweeting, of course they had to get some sense and realize that that statement didn't make any sense, that he couldn't do it. There was no law to back it up. There's no law saying tweeting was illegal. My organization and a few other organizations, it had press releases in 2 newspapers and online. And the head of those press statements, not even press releases, statements, is that we will keep tweeting, and basically challenged him and the government of Nigeria to come and find us and arrest us because there was no law. Because, the statement was you will find out in court what law you are violating if you continue to tweet. So anyway, I am glad he received sense and backtracked from that statement. But yeah, Twitter and Nigeria will negotiate or will will talk. Let me put it that way, and that's what should have happened, not the knee-jerk reaction that we saw. But I think what's very interesting is how we want to redefine what it means to be a broadcast outfit. So the full-page ad that came out, I believe it was on Friday, that talked about anybody who has an online platform needs to get a broadcast license. So Twitter now has to get a broadcast license, when in the same act, if I'm not mistaken, it defines broadcast as with physical equipment. So I'm not quite sure which physical equipment Twitter has in Nigeria that allows it to function. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that in terms of lawsuits. Unfortunately, I guess the way the law works, and Dr. Bhatt, you can correct me, people like myself or other organizations can't sue the NBC for writing or making a demand, because we don't have local standing, as they say, to sue them. But it will be very interesting anyway to see how the discussions evolve. But again, as I said last week, the federal government of Nigeria is leaving leprosy to chase ringworm. I think that's how the phrase goes. And focusing on the minor and leaving major things. Twitter is a platform, it's a medium of communication. If Nigerians were not upset, were not frustrated, were not unemployed, were not in poverty, they will not be saying the things they're saying on Twitter that's upsetting you. So it's not Jack Dorsey that's the cause of your headache. It's actually the fact that you're governing the country in a very bad way, and people are upset. So let's see what happens out of the conversations, and we'll see how that goes. But I am glad actually that this is happening. Oh, something I wanted to say. I knew there was something I wanted to say. So the Nigerian government and their officials, since they can't tweet. Oh, and again, Malami Rufai was tweeting. Governor Seyi Makinde was tweeting. So were they planning to arrest those ones? And even Mr. Malami himself, lest I forget, he had to log into Twitter to close his account. And to do that, he had to use a VPN. And then we saw on his screen a logo for a Bitcoin trader. This is the same country that bans cryptocurrency. Wow. So, I mean, the hypocrisy speaks for itself. But lastly, let me just make this point. The Nigerian government is now using an Indian copycat of Twitter called Koo. But guess what? Whereas Twitter has a bird, some chirpy bird as a logo, Koo's logo is a chicken. Chick, chick, quack, quack. I mean, not quack.
It's also a bird, except that the color is different. It's yellow.
It's a chicken, and it just speaks to the Nigerian government. Chickens, 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 chasing citizens for speaking the truth. But I'm glad they're on Koo. They should be cooing on Koo. You're right.
Well, Koo looks like an attempt, to cook up a coup against freedom of expression.
No, it's a yellow chicken. Can it be yellow? Chicken.
Dr. Haneri, what is?
So we've joined a group of countries. China, North Korea, and Iran are the only other 3 countries that have banned Twitter. Oh, by the way, Twitter threw Trump out, and I think Facebook banned him for life or something. But Donald Trump says that, there's a good thing that Twitter has been banned in Nigeria, that if only he had thought of it, he would have banned it in the US. So that's just some background in case you didn't have that information. But Agbaya Kponlu, my biggest problem with Nigeria is that people...
Can you translate that into English?
I don't know if Agbaya has translation. But I will say the context of what I mean. Too many people are sitting on the fence. Is this right or wrong? There are too many politicians speaking, right? And they're speaking out of 2 sides of their mouths. And it is a tragedy that we do not have people that can take a moral stance. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have in Nigeria. People should get up and speak truth to power. You will not starve to death. You will not die. Open your mouth and tell the truth. Now, this statement, Twitter needs Nigeria and Nigeria needs Twitter. Who you help? What does that even mean? So when I hear things like that, I'm really upset because it doesn't move us forward. We knew that before this whole thing started. So what have you added to the conversation? Absolutely nothing. Please, leaders should take a stand. People made money out of, people live off social media. How much work is there in the first place? Can we afford the luxury of banning social media? This is totally unfair on a lot of levels. And leadership is not just political appointments. Leadership is also being an adult in society. I'm African enough to have that position. I'm sorry. The adults in our society should get up and speak. This sitting on the fence it generates disrespect from the younger generation. Because they look at you and they're like, is this it? Is this the leadership? So I think more leaders should get up and speak. That is my position.
Well, quickly, Chike, your take.
Well, it's surprising that...
Are you on Twitter?
No, of course I was. Don't put me in trouble, I was. Oh, yes, I used to tweet.
Chike.
Yeah, I used to tweet about things that concerned and were that relevant to me at whatever point in time. But why I was laughing was what Didi said about politicians. And Didi should know that politicians... That is what they are. Politicians. They are meant to say one thing in the morning, say a different thing in the afternoon, and deny both at night on the same day. That is what politics is all about. At least so I was taught. But the truth is this. When Yemi was speaking, she talked about the whole issue with Twitter. But I think Twitter did not... Twitter was not banned in Nigeria because of what Nigerian youths were writing or tweeting about it. It was simply because they took away the president's tweet, if I understand that correctly.
Well, the Minister of Information said Twitter had been engaging in activities that threatened the corporate existence of Nigeria.
So that was the final straw.
Twitter or Twitter users?
That was the final straw that broke the camel's back. The taking off of the, But, again, like both discussants have said, we have to understand that Twitter, it's like a place of work. It's not just about tweeting anymore. People earn their daily living from those things, from this platform, this microblogging platform. The young people, that is their life. That is where they live. And that is where they make their daily living. You see, leadership now, some of us, even those of us in our 60s now, early 60s, getting to 60 and all that, we are becoming out of touch with these people. And that is why I'm a great advocate of, if it wouldn't be too draconian and anti-democratic, I would even say we should have a law that you said the president should not be older than 55 years old. I'm telling you, that's what we need now in Nigeria. And cascade it downwards for everything else. We don't need a speaker that is over 40 years. We don't need a Senate president that's over 45 years. And because we have to play catch up in Nigeria. Do you see the other leaders of other countries? Scandinavian countries, some young girls, I don't even call them ladies, riding bicycles up and down. These are the leaders of the country. Even Paul Macron that was slapped the other day anyhow, like a little boy. Did you see how he was slapped? That was the president of France. France is a member of the G7.
Anyway, you just mentioned G7, so let's go to the G7 summit in Cornwall, United Kingdom, where world leaders have been holding meetings over a period of 3 days to discuss how to deal with the fallout of the COVID pandemic, economic recovery, climate change, and more. The host country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced hours ago in his closing remark that the G7 worthy nations have pledged over 1 billion coronavirus vaccine doses for poorer nations, half of them coming from the United States. While the U.S. President Joe Biden acknowledged the Group of Seven summit was extraordinarily collaborative and productive, and stressed that leaders were united in a global recovery effort following the pandemic.
A week ago, I asked my fellow leaders to help in preparing and providing the doses we need to vaccinate the whole world by the end of 2022. I'm very pleased to announce that this weekend, leaders have pledged over 1 billion doses, either directly or through funding to COVAX. That includes 100 million from the UK to the world's poorest countries, which is another big step towards vaccinating the world. And
we've just wrapped up what has been an extraordinary collaborative and productive meeting in the G7. Everyone at the table understood and understands both the seriousness and the challenges that we are up against and the responsibility of our proud democracies to step up and deliver for the rest of the world. That's what the G7 is all about, and rallying the world's democracies to meet the challenges that the world faces.
Well, this was a more different, G7 summit from what happened in Biarritz, France in 2019, when Trump's presence was a major hindrance. Trump taking on Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada and, not reaching a consensus on the issue of climate change. Here, there was some kind of unity of purpose in Cornwall. One, on the issue of steps to be taken to end the pandemic. 1 billion vaccines, an additional 1 billion has also been pledged, so totally 2 billion. Although the WHO and the United Nations claim that that will not be enough. Now, what will be needed will be up to about 11 billion vaccine doses to be able to reach 70%. There was also a commitment to climate financing and taking concrete steps. There was also commitment in terms of infrastructure to help poorer countries of the world. There was also a commitment, there was also a consensus around Russia. How Russia now has become the headquarters of ransomware, scammers, attackers, No consensus on China, as the United States wanted, but at the end of the day, the communique expressed concern about human rights abuses in China. And then, of course, the summit adopted the slogan, build back together, in terms of commitment to build back the world and to ensure, progress. But the United States was a major presence there. And for President Joe Biden, he's been saying that the United States has used the opportunity of this summit to re-establish the leading role of the United States. Dr. Nwaneri, do you agree with that?
So it's a refreshing change that there was a G7
G7. Russia was
summit,
kicked out in 2014.
G7 summit, and they didn't come out of it like in the last 2-3 years squabbling over minor issues. What you did not mention that I wanted to talk about that I alluded to earlier was that they also reached a consensus that multinational companies will begin to pay globally a 15% tax rate on whatever they generate, and interestingly, where they generate it. So what that means is that I think they were trying to, these big telecoms companies that are like located somewhere, the whole shenanigans of claiming an address, right? Yeah. And just evading or avoiding taxes, not evading. Evading is a crime, avoiding is permitted. So where I find that interesting is where it concerns Nigeria. If multinational companies operating in Nigeria begin to adhere to that and bring the money into Nigeria, what does that mean for us? Are we capable of managing
It's called
that?
corporation tax. It will still come up at the G20 in July. And, maybe then there will be a consensus.
Well.
They also could not reach a consensus on the waiver of patents.
Yes.
With regard to COVID, waiver of intellectual property rights, which the US, India, and South Africa have been pushing. Boris Johnson was very clear that that's not the way to go. But let me come to you, Chike.
Well, further to what Ndidi was talking about, because this actually is something I'm concerned about, because like she's trying to say, it is something that will be helpful to home economies. Mm-hmm. You see, a lot of companies have become what you call liquid companies. Mm-hmm. That is, they're all over the world. And like you rightly said, they don't even have an address. But it doesn't matter. If new laws have to be made, copyright laws, patent laws, and all of that, in international laws, may that be the case. Because these companies are making plenty of money in the different jurisdictions. Let's come back to the same Twitter we are talking about. You can imagine the kind of money Twitter makes in Nigeria.
40 million.
Okay, does Twitter pay any tax in Nigeria? Shouldn't it? As it should in every other jurisdiction it operates in, provided nobody is saying, they will have a healthy profit, but at least they will give something back to where they are operating. Even that's why companies do CSRs, corporate social responsibilities. But this is even a tax which is taxable in the income. So that is the first thing I want to say. Then the second thing is obviously about COVID, and I need to say that quickly. The G7 has to do more. That is the bottom line. They have to do more because the amount of money they have talking about is not enough to vaccinate 70% of the world's population.
Well, Yemi, we have just about 2 minutes to go. For you, what are the most important outcomes of the G7 summit in Cornwall? COVID-19 solidarity, or climate change, or the attack on Russia and China?
Well, I think the climate change one was expected, so that was good to hear. I think also the tone, which is just very important at a time like this, the world coming out of a pandemic.
Uchenna,
the world.
Doing the program.
Please go ahead. I'm listening to you.
All right, the world coming out of a pandemic, and the sort of a different tone of cooperation, of global cooperation, and what that looks like and what that means for the rest of us when the big players in the world are not bickering like children, but actually looking to making the world a better and a safer place. But the COVID one is interesting. I'm not too off that England has that position. They have one vaccine, so it's not surprising that they want to protect whatever intellectual properties come with that. Where I think the US has three patents. But I imagine that will change as conversations continue and negotiations continue. But it was good to see a G7 summit that was cordial.
And for the first time, the royal family attended, and there was that, reception at the Eden Project, said to be the largest rainforest in the world, in quotes, I guess, and an opportunity for Britain to showcase its commitment to green technology. I think on the whole, it was a successful summit. Well, thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun. You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.